Shh. Shh. It's oh so quiet. Shh. Shh. It's oh so still. Shh. Shh. You're all alone. Shh. Shh. And so peaceful until you fall in love. Sing from the sky up above. Sing from is caving in. Wow! You never been so nuts about a guy you wanna love. You wanna cry, you cross your heart and hope to die. I'm falling in love. The sky keeps in, the devil cuts loose. You blow, 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 blow your fuse. When you fall in
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Irish Bookshop show. So this is a show that we've started on social media in an effort to show you that independent bookshops are still here. Sometimes it's easy to forget that, considering we're into the 13th week of lockdown 3 now, and personally we've been closed here in Wexford town for 7 months out of the last 12. So this is kind of the nuclear option for us. We have to try and get out there and beat social media's algorithms. So on this show every week, we're going to show some of the books that are sitting on the shelves in the bookshop. We're going to show you around the bookshop. We're going to have some of our readers do reviews of their favourite books. We're going to be joined by up-and-coming writers and that kind of thing. So I want to talk to you about a couple of the books that are sitting on the shelves here at Red Books. First of all, this is one of my favourites, brand new editions of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Everybody's heard of this book. They may not have read it. You may not have got around to it, but this is a fundamental book in Western literature, in world literature. It's one of the greatest novels of all time. Some people say this book gave birth to the modern thriller, but it goes much farther than that. And it tells the story of Raskolnikov, who's a guy who's pretty down and out, and he decides that he has no choice but to commit murder. And the book deals with his inner angst. It deals with the moral and psychological ramifications of deciding to kill somebody. And it's just an absolute classic. We have that on the shelf brand new for €3. It's definitely worth reading, lads. Next book, one of my favourite writers, Hunter S. Thompson, the guy who invented gonzo journalism. You might know Hunter. Famously, he wrote the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. He started out as a reporter. He travelled around America covering events. He took a lot of drugs. He got involved in all sorts of things. He ended up becoming a politician himself. But these essays deal with his loathing of politicians. He wrote a book in 1972 called Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, where he followed around Nixon. This will have some of those stories. It also deals up until the 1992 election, where he was following Clinton around. So we have a good few of those on the shelves as well. This book, insanely funny, one of the funniest writers going today, Don O'Porter. The Cows, again, brand new copies. We're selling them for a £5. Now, just go on and have a look at Amazon. Go on and have a look at the Book Depository or Eason's or anybody else. You're not going to get brand new copies of The Cows for a £5 anywhere. And people text us constantly and they say, look, the postage is a problem. Because we're operating, obviously we can't open now. We can't let you into our store. We're not even allowed to do click and collect. And they say, well, why are you charging postage? We're charging postage because we're being charged for postage. And you don't get free postage anywhere. If you're dealing with the Book Depository, they put the cost of the postage onto the book before they send it out. So we're selling these books for a £5. There's free delivery in Wexford Town, and it's standard postage everywhere else. Now the thing we do is we don't charge by postage per item, we charge per weight. So if you're buying a good few books, you'll get them cheaper. Another great book, Irish Interest book by Anne Hathaway. Anne Hathaway was a synonym for Claire Lloyd, who was the wife of a Dublin publisher. Now she wrote this book without any jest, called the Homecraft Book, which was written really in its time in the 1940s. It's about how to be a good housewife. It was republished by her son as kind of taking the mickey a little bit, but it's a great book, and there are some brilliant tips for anybody in it as well. And it's interesting to see what people thought in 1945 compared to what they thought and think now. The next one is another Irish novel. We have brand new copies of this, one of my favourite Irish writers of all time, Edna O'Brien. This is one of her later novels. So Time and Tide portrays the loves and catastrophes and catastrophic loves of Nell, an Irish woman trying to make a life for herself in the literary world of London. Like most of O'Brien's novels, it parallels her own life. She had to leave Ireland in the 60s after Country Girls. She left her husband, she had a young family, and she tried to raise him in that literary world. I love this quote on the back. As her disturbing novel clearly reveals, Edna O'Brien possesses what Henry James called an imagination for disaster. So that's, again, brand new copies for a fiver at www.theirishbookshop.com. Next ones I want to show you are a trilogy. The Echoland series by Joe Joyce. So we have Echoland, we have Echo Beat, and we have Echo Wave. And as you can see, these are brand new books that have never been read. We're doing the trilogy for a tenner. So, I mean, you're not going to get these anywhere for a tenner for the trilogy. In fact, it'll cost you a tenner for one of them. Great series set in World War II Ireland. And if you like thrillers, if you like Benjamin Black, you'll love that. And then finally, I want to show you this. This is a fantastic book, brand new again. Dictionary of Irish Artists, 20th Century by Theo Snodney. An invaluable guide to 20th century Irish artists. Formidable research, meticulous findings, a classic. That's from the Times Literary Supplement. You can see on the back that this book costs $80 new. If you go online, you'll find them for 50. You might find them £45 sterling. You won't find them much cheaper. We're selling these for €20. And again, if you wanted to order all of the books here today, we'd probably get them into one packet, so you'd get them all delivered to your house for probably €6.80, at the most about €11, but probably €6.80 for the whole lot for delivery, which is incredible. Try and do that with anyone else. So those are the books I want to look at this week. We've lots more stuff coming up, and next I want to talk to you about William Burroughs, infamous writer of Naked Lunch, and I want to talk about Burroughs and the Lemurian Time War.
But first, a message from our sponsor.
Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie the Book Hound here, to tell you just how easy it is to order books online from an Irish bookshop. You know, when I was young and foolish, a pup oak, I ordered books from Amazon. Little did I know that each book cost me more. It cost me more on postage, and all my hard-earned dog money went out of Ireland. You get me, huh? Who's your doggy? But now you can order from Red Books in Wexford at www.theirishbookshop.com. They offer bulk delivery, so the more you order, the more you save. Groucho Marx once said, outside a dog, a book is man's best friend, and inside a dog, it's too dark to read. Huh? Who's your doggy? Now, I'm going to hand you over to the Beatmaster General, Seth Reilly, who's just nearly as hairy as I am. Huh?
Hello everybody, this is Seth Reilly. I'm sorry if I look a bit wild. It's because I am a bit wild. Lockdown and all of that jazz. I'm here to talk about my book, All of Them Hipsters. I'm glad Wally invited me to contribute to this book show. I'm releasing with Wally on the great Red Books publishing house, publishing label, and it's been good so far. You know, being involved, I write and I also do some videos and layouts and editing for other writers on the label. So I'm involved from the ground up, you know, rooted. So I'm going to discuss a few themes, recurring common themes in the book. The book is, I wouldn't call it semi-autobiographical, however you pronounce that. I would call it inspired by a liberal interpretation of true events that may or may not have occurred during my lifetime as a young, red-blooded, toxically masculine misogynist. Don't tell anyone else. It's about how I learned to live and love, and hopefully learn and become somewhat more calm, maybe. Not necessarily enlightened, but you know, this is a catharsis for me. It was a creative endeavor to release the writer that I've always been. So let's look at I'm just gonna open a random bit and sort of just read it to you. Oh no, actually I don't like this part. I'm gonna read something else. Coffee, one after the other. Wind up the pocket watch again. It's getting closer to midnight. Eric's a tea on the radio. Glorious night, but I don't act grateful. I act like a spoiled little bitch, Scarlett O'Hara. I end up hating things and places I used to love or still love, just because I can't bend them exactly to my will, even though they have given and are still giving me every ounce of magic I ever prayed for, and much more than even that. I act the bollocks again. I take good things and I turn them bad. It's not a pity party. No woe is me. Don't feel sorry for me. I have managed to bend things to my will before. That magic exists. We can never undo certain things. I wanted to go plant my wish inside the wishing tree to manifest. I got halfway down the path between 11 and midnight. I felt uneasy and I said to myself, come on now, be brave. It's only your back garden. Big back garden. Lovely black garden. Lucky to live in a house of such a huge garden. Lately ungrateful. This is it, you know. It's about learning to be grateful of the simple things in life. Things that a lot of us take for granted when we grew up with a certain level of privilege. So it's about realizing that and using art to lift yourself, and then once you've lifted yourself and you've got the power, then you can lift other people up as well. And that's That's the main thing that we all have to strive to do. And hopefully great books can contribute to that. So, all of them hipsters, you can buy it if you message Wally, Rate Books on Facebook, Instagram. You can go on theirishbookshop.com. The is important, not just Irish Bookshop, because that will bring you somewhere else. Theirishbookshop.com, that will bring you to the website. You can buy this great book, even if I say so myself. Free local delivery and then worldwide postage at very reasonable rates. There's loads of other good local books as well, from loads of great writers, Wexford writers, Ruby O'Connor, Di Kavanagh, Matthew White. There's so many. Just go and look it up. And lots of other books, second-hand books at amazing prices, brand new books. There's something for everyone. Something to lift the spirit up and keep you happy in lockdown, and wherever in the world you may not be in lockdown, but nowhere is unaffected by the we're not going to say the name. We all know what it's about, right? All of them hipsters. Buy it, read it. Once you have, contact me and talk to me about it if you want. Even if you hated it, I still love you.
Singing Fly is an Irish literary magazine. Its initial purpose was to seek out, promote and publish international and of course Irish writing. March 2021 marks the 23rd anniversary of the first issue of The Stinging Fly. The first issue had 5 short stories and less than 20 poems. Not only does The Stinging Fly have massive names as editors, for example Sally Rooney and Danny Denton, it has also published some of the best known writers in Ireland today, such as Paula Meehan, Colin McCann and Emma Donoghue, but to name a few. This is the 43rd and most recent issue of The Stinging Fly. Within this, there are 11 short fiction stories, 1 Cobh Celg, 26 poems and 9 essays. So as you can see from its first issue in 1998, The Stinging Fly has come a long way. In this issue, there is an essay published by Roisin Kibbard, whose debut book, The Disconnect, was published earlier this month. The Disconnect tracks Roisin's growing up with technology and her adjustment to the internet at a young age. It is an anthology of short stories as well as being a memoir. Another big name in this issue is Rob Doyle. I am currently reading his most previous book, Threshold, that was published in January 2020. It is about a narrator who ingests literature and drugs in equal amounts. Wexford native Peter Murphy is also published in this book. Where We Come From is an apt essay that I would highly recommend reading if you ever stumble across this copy of The Stinging Fly. If Enniscorthy was the home I came from, then Wexford town, 20 miles down the road, is the home I came to. I go mad in landlocked places. The sense of being trapped, of stagnation and decay. Towns or cities built on the sea suggest the possibility of embarkment, escape. In Wexford town there are open mic nights and coffee shops, and the pubs pipe their bar staff's playlists. There are food festivals and plays and concerts in the Arts Centre and the Opera House, fishing boats and trawlers moored on the quay. It is a town full of musicians, painters, playwrights, filmmakers, photographers, writers and actors. But it can't be a European city of culture because Wexford is not a city. It's a town, a big town, a port town, maybe a portal to another dimension, but still a town. That town nestles in a county, and in that county there are so many creative practitioners I can't even begin naming them for fear of the ones I'll forget. And besides, it will probably just read like a list of artists you've never heard of because we live too far from media centres to be included in dispatches and broadcasts. That's not an anti-Dublin dig, it's just the fact that journalists and bloggers can no longer afford to spend money on travel and accommodation to cover this near subversive cultural regeneration occurring in places like our county and in Limerick and Cork and Derry and Belfast. So it's incumbent upon to us make ourselves heard, to amplify those voices and promote galleries and gigs to theatre productions and independent bookshops and publications that sprout like mushrooms every autumn. And yes, a virus killed this year's crop, but they'll grow back.
Not only has The Stinging Fly changed the Irish writing scene, but it's also been world-renowned. It is hard to think that Irish literature would be half as good as it currently is, or half as recognised as it currently is, without anthologies such as The Stinging Fly. I hope you enjoyed this little talk about The Stinging Fly, and I hope you consider reading or even submitting to The Stinging Fly in the future. I know for a fact that it has shaped my experiences in literature. I'm a big advocate for Irish writing, and The Stinging Fly is basically embodies that as a literary magazine. Now enjoy the rest of the Irish Bookshop podcast, and don't forget to visit theirishbookshop.com. These are two of the most recent books I got on the irishbookshop.com, and I'm definitely going to be visiting again. The price was absolutely amazing, so reasonable for these books. You have Lord of the Flies, which is a classic that's been around for years. I couldn't find it anywhere, and A Little Life that I had never even heard of before I saw it on the website. And I've been discussing this book with a few of my friends. It's 720 pages and he delivered it to me. I am so grateful because it is very heavy. Make sure to visit that website and look at all the books he has to offer. Enjoy the rest of the night, as I said, and make sure to tune in next week and we'll have a few more gems for you.
How could we possibly do a bookshop show without mentioning two of the most iconic booksellers of all time? The Jagger and Lennon of book dealing, Lawrence Ferlinghetti and George Whitman. These two men continue to be inspirations for a generation of book lovers and booksellers embroiled in a battle of survival with Amazon. Both came from a similar place in that they were young Americans that got caught up in the Second World War and were both disgusted by what they saw and turned into lifelong pacifists and anarchists. George Whitman was left stranded in Paris after the war, swapping GI food stamps for GI book stamps. Using this formula, he lost a lot of weight and accumulated a vast collection of books. After setting up a lending library in his flat, Whitman went on to establish a small English bookstore in Paris. Years later, he met Sylvia Beach, a personal muse of his, who had ran a legendary bookshop called Shakespeare and Company in the Left Bank from 1919 to 1941. The little bookstore became a focal point for some of the greatest writers of the 20th century, with Ernest Hemingway, T.S. Eliot, F. Scott Fitzgerald and James Joyce patronising the shop. Beach even published the first edition of Joyce's Ulysses, risking financial ruin and even jail to bring it to the world. In 1941, during the Nazi occupation of Paris, Beach refused to sell a first edition copy of Finnegan's Wake to a Nazi officer and instead closed down her store for good. Now, on meeting a kindred spirit in Whitman, she agreed to let him use the name Shakespeare and Company. Whitman's Shakespeare and Company was an anarchic assemblage of books, writers and imagination let run wild. He kitted out crevices in between shelves with bunks and let travelling artists, backpackers and beatniks sleep among the books in exchange for work, reading a book a day and writing. Once again, writers of the day flocked to this mecca. James Baldwin, Annis Nin, Henry Miller, Allen Ginsberg, Gregory Corso and Lawrence Durrell, to name but a few, and once again the bookstore endeavoured to publish their works. Meanwhile, Lawrence Ferlinghetti had returned to America after his war. He had commanded a sub-hunter on D-Day and had visited Japan 4 weeks after the atom bombs were dropped, prompting him to become a lifelong peace advocate. Ferlinghetti moved west like many of the disillusioned and ended up in a bustling San Francisco. There he met Peter Martin and opened America's first paperback bookstore, City Lights. City Lights, like Shakespeare and Company, became a mecca for readers and writers. They set up a publishing house and began bringing out works from writers like Charles Bukowski, Jack Kerouac and William Burroughs. They also published Allen Ginsberg's seminal Howl, which resulted in Ferlinghetti's arrest and a court trial which became an examination of the very nature of censorship. An examination that Ferlinghetti won. These booksellers still inspire us today, though both are now sadly gone. Gone from this world, but their spirit endures.
Hi everyone, the second book is finally out, The Elemental Witches Creed Draefta. So I'll just give you a little synopsis of what this book is about. So the Elemental Witches are back, and after defying all odds by slaying Balor, a new evil has emerged and is thirsty for revenge. With a rise in demon energy being brought about by their new foe, Anna and her fellow elemental witches must embark on a series of dangerous exploits to ensure the survival of both themselves and humanity. What ensues is a callous clash pitting the elemental witches and their guardians against one of the strongest evils Ireland has ever known.
It's getting hot in here, so take off all your clothes.
In April 1987, Omni's science fiction journal published a short story by William S. Burroughs called The Ghostly Lemurs of Madagascar. The story seemed on the surface to carry many of the now infamous Burroughs tropes. Sex, drugs, high weirdness, and even a reoccurring character in the shape of libertarian pirate Captain Mission. But little did readers know that this story had been preordained 3 decades earlier and represented the final move in a temporal war, and was in fact essential to save the very fabric of reality from being torn apart by dark matter. Or was it? In the mid-1990s, a group of experimental researchers and cultural theorists established the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit at Warwick University in England. They were removed from the university campus later after engaging in unethical research and began operating out of a nearby flat. It was there, according to their own writings, that they were approached by an intelligence asset called William Kay, a man suffering from what he described as paranoid, chronomanic hallucinations. He was to tell them a story that defied all scientific knowledge and the very rules of logic. He was to tell them a story about one William S. Burroughs. William Burroughs was a writer, artist, chaos magician, and notorious heroin user, who is credited today as being one of the founders of the Beat movement and the subsequent social and political unrest of the 1960s. He wrote 18 novels, including the seminal Junkie and Naked Lunch. He wrote about what he saw every day: drugs, gay sex, black magic, although much of this seems to have been overlooked, maybe because of Burroughs' use of the cut-up technique in his writing, where he would literally cut up his sentences to make new ones. Jack Kerouac called Burroughs the greatest satirical writer since Jonathan Swift. Norman Mailer declared him the only American writer who may be conceivably possessed by genius. But back to the CCRU and William Kay. Why was Burroughs so important in Kay's story? Well, here's how it plays out. Shortly after the end of the Second World War, Peter Vasparov, a man of wealth and means, who may also have been a Soviet intelligence asset, set up the Cthulhu Society, an occult group dedicated to investigating the possible reality of the literary works of the 1920s horror writer H.P. Lovecraft. Vasparov sought out Burroughs in 1958 because of his interest in the convergence of sorcery, dreams and fiction, and his belief that Burroughs perfectly represented this. Burroughs was invited to a Christmas party at Vasparnov's mansion in New York on December 23rd. They drank and conversed. Vasparnov told Burroughs that his firm belief that fictions could create reality. This is a theory called hyperstition. Burroughs stumbled into the host's library after quite a few drinks and picked a book seemingly at random off a shelf of unparalleled, rare occult works. It was an old picture book with gilt-edged lithographs, onion paper over each picture, and on the front, the ghostly lemurs of Madagascar in gold script. Flipping through the pages, Burroughs entered a momentary catatonic trance state. He emerged disorientated and scarcely able to stand. Despite his confusion, he was more than willing to describe, with a strange sardonic detachment, the anomalous episode. Burroughs told Kay that during the trance, it felt as though silent communication with a ghostly non-human companion had flashed him forward to his life as an old man, several decades in the future. Oppressed by a crushing sensation of implacable destiny, as if fragments of a frozen time dimension were cascading into awareness. He remembered writing the ghostly lemurs of Madagascar, although it wasn't writing exactly, and his writing implements were archaic, belonging to someone else entirely, in another place and time. Even after his recovery, the sense of oppression persisted, like a new dimension of gravity. The vision had granted him horrific insight into the jailhouse mind of the one god. He was convinced the knowledge was dangerous and that powerful forces were conspiring against him, that the invisible brothers are invading present time. The episode sharpened his already vivid impression that the human animal is cruelly caged in time by an alien power. Recalling it later, he would write, "Time is a human affliction, not a human invention, but a prison." Burroughs was haunted by predestination. According to Kay, in that library in 1958, Burroughs had realised that the antiquarian book he held in his hand, over 300 years old, was a book he would write in the future. And what's more, the book had already been read and it had inspired an anarchist pirate captain who had been dead for 2 centuries. Burroughs was haunted. Past and future had already been moulded by a present that was on autopilot. There was no escape. Although Burroughs tried, with his cut-up method he hoped to confuse and dispound the human brain's reliance on time perception. He took a lot of heroin and delved even deeper into the occult, all to avoid conceding to destiny. But destiny won. Burroughs could not avoid writing the ghostly moors of Madagascar. The time paradox seemed fixed, Kay said, until they realised that Burroughs, being Burroughs, had changed the ending to the story. One final act of anarchism that would have made Captain Mission proud. Kay's own final words to the CCRU, written on a scrap of paper, upon which he had scrawled hurriedly in a spiderish hand that already indicated the tide of encroaching insanity, remained consistent with this unsatisfactory conclusion. Across the time rift, termination confuses itself with eddies of a latent spiral current. Of course, the likelihood is the CCRU were academic pranksters, carrying out guerrilla ontology. They likely invented the whole story as a parable of quantum mechanics, using the counterculture icon Burroughs as a straw man to try and push some perceived truth of importance into the mainstream. But then the words of William Burroughs ring home. "Language is a virus from outer space," he said. "Smash the control images. Smash the control machine."
I drove my tractor through your haystack last night.
So it's hard to believe that we're now a year into this pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns. It was around this time last year that Aideen Hassad of Brown Fire Protection approached us with an exciting idea of running a short story competition for kids. At the time the schools have been closed, there was a lot of very bored kids and worried parents around the place. So Aideen and Brown Fire Protection very generously offered to donate prize money every week, and it ran for 14 weeks. And it was always our intention at the time, thinking that lockdowns were going to be a very short thing, that we would bring out a book highlighting these talented young Wexford writers. And now we are. So the Great Wexford Short Story Book will be brought out in the coming weeks. And we have 45 young writers who have won the right to be in this book. Now, the first thing we have to say is we can only fit so many people into this book, and everyone who entered this competition was fantastic, and we'll probably do another volume if it takes off. But here's the 45 writers that have been picked out by our judges to go into the book. Martha O'Connor Cousin, Marion McCrabb, Aoife Harris, Shane Malidi, Max Rappel, Eleanor Gann, Sean Gann, Quiva Hobson, Jane Rothwell, Maeve Byrne, Ciara Byrne, Aoife Murphy, Emmett Hobson, Mia Burke Delaney, Shannon Wiles, Adam Deacon, Noah O'Connor, Jude Dixon, Hannah Nolan, Nathan Carroll, Katie Nolan, Connor Healy, Ella Gallagher, Roisin Hensman, Lily Walsh, Lily Doyle, Anna McAvoy, Keelan Scallon, Danielle Cooney O'Neill, Donna Hawhian, Maeve Arrigan, Aidan Furlong, John Donoghue, Mia Darcy, Ava Buttle, Evie Bulger, Michael Mercer, Thomas O'Brien, Kitty Dorn, Evelyn Long, Holly Lovelace, Anya O'Neill, Christopher Taylor Walsh, Layla Nugent, and Pete Myden. And like I said, we had hundreds and hundreds of fantastic writers that entered this competition over the 14 weeks and the competition we ran over Christmas for lockdown stories. But these 45 are the ones that will be going in the first book. It'll be produced by Red Books Press and it'll be available to buy even if lockdown continues off theirishbookshop.com.
Hi everyone, how's things? I'm delighted to be part of the first Irish Bookshop show. Well done to Wally O'Neill and everyone at Red Books for their initiative on this. Today I'm going to talk about, of course we know that Wexford is a great home to poets, and of course Red Books is home to a great beatnik community. My favourite poet is that of the great man Patrick Kavanagh. As you can see, I'm kind of in a Patrick Kavanagh pose here. Patrick Kavanagh was probably one of the greatest poets of all time, Irish poets of all time. Most famous for writing the poem Raglan Road, which was then recorded as a song by the great late Luke Kelly. Also famous for Tara Flynn and the Green Fool. I'm going to just read a few poems that I believe that Patrick Kavanagh wrote, which I believe are outstanding, brilliant, and don't get the recognition they deserve. So the first poem I'm going to read tonight is called White Bread by Patrick Kavanagh. White bread, you give us hope. You break the grey monotony of the story. It is not how you look or taste, but in the imagination that blossoms in the waste. When we look at that loaf that is not hardy, white bread, you are a mirror and back, reflecting midnight light streets, cigarettes, tea, sugar, gas always on, buses coming home at 1:45, all that's invoked by the name of peace. So the second poem I'm going to read by Patrick Kavanagh is that called Poet. Once the golden book was opened to me, and I read the answer to the riddle, and I, an unschooled rustic, was wise at fools' laughter in an academy, and the words flowed with the waters of life, or the candle's flame ascended dream spirals, and I carved images in stone of mind that are terrified children and pale priests of mass. Another great poem there by Patrick Kavanagh. And the final poem I'm going to read tonight is called Primrose. Upon a bank I sat, a child may sneer, of one small primrose flowering in my mind. Better than wealth it is, I said, to find one small page of truth's manuscript made clear. I looked at Christ transfigured without fear. The light was very beautiful and kind, and where the Holy Ghost and flame had signed, I read it through the lens of a tear, and then my sight grew dim. I could not see the primrose that had lightened me to heaven, and there was but the shadow of a tree, ghostly amongst the stars. The years that pass like tired soldiers nevermore have given moments to see wonders in the grass. And this is the Patrick book that I'm reading from. It's the Patrick Kavanagh The Complete Poems. I'm pretty sure Wally might have a copy if you want to get it off him. Patrick Kavanagh is widely recognised in Ireland now, and of course is the world, as one of the greatest poets of all time. He's inspired me to write most of my poetry and has a great influence on myself. He's also on the Leaving Cert curriculum. I think Patrick Kavanagh's legacy in this country is one of where he's inspired many people. Just like the beatnik community has inspired poets, Patrick Kavanagh has inspired poets as well as Seamus. He's also inspired Seamus Heaney, and Patrick himself was inspired by W.B. Yeats. This is a great country we live in for writing, for poetry, and I'd just like to say thank you again to Wally for asking me to do this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. D.A. Gaisney, signing out. Take care.
The song I'm going to sing for you now is a very old and classic song by the great singer of Country Roads and Annie's Song and all those great songs, the great American singer John Denver. And it's one of his classic songs, and it's a song called Some Days Are Diamonds and Some Days Are Stones. I think we all get days, every one of us. I think we all get days in our lives when we have good days and we have bad days. Or as the song says, we all get days in our lives when our days are like diamonds, and we all get bad days where they're like stones. So this song I think is very appropriate for all these hard times. I think we can all relate to it. It's a brilliant song by John Denver called Some Days Are Diamonds and Some Days Are Stones. If you know the chorus, join in. When you ask how I've been here without you, I'd like to say I've been fine, and I do. But we both know the truth is hard to come by. And if I told the truth, that's not quite true. Some days are diamonds, some days are stones. Sometimes the hard times won't leave me alone. Sometimes the cold wind blows a chill in my bones. Some days are diamonds, some days are stones. We all get those days, every one of us. We all get good days and we all get bad days. That's what the message of this song is. Some days are good, some days are bad. We all know that. Got a face that I see in my mirror. More and more is a stranger to me. We all relate to this one. More and more I can see there's a danger in becoming what I never thought I'd be. Some days are diamonds, some days are stones. Sometimes the hard times won't leave me alone, and sometimes the cold wind blows a chill in my bones. Some days are diamonds, some days are stones. some days are stones. Sometimes the hard times won't leave me alone. 'Cause sometimes the cold wind blows a chill in my bones. Some days are diamonds, and some days are stones. Some days are diamonds, some days are stones. Sometimes the hard times won't leave me alone. Sometimes the cold wind blows a chill in my bones. Some days are diamonds, and some days are stones.
I like big books, I cannot lie. You speed readers can't deny. When you get stuck with an itty bitty text, you read it real fast and you're on to the next. Give me Gone with the Wind or Ducks, you